Greetings and salutations, everyone. I've been meaning to make this video, obviously, for the past few days now, but I have been rather busy as of lately. I mean, this past weekend was 4th of July, so to all my fellow Americans, I sincerely hope that you all had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Now it is back to business with this channel, so in today's video we are going to discuss issue 193 of The Walking Dead. Now this is your obligatory spoiler warning for those of you who are not caught up on the comic and absolutely do not want to know the contents in issue 193, well, you know the drill. As I had previously stated in a video in regards to news on The Walking Dead, including the comic, I mentioned that there was a leaked image of a letter hack from Robert Kirkman. And I think it is safe for me to say that this leak turned out to be true. Issue 193 is indeed the final installment of the Walking Dead series. I will admit that a part of me is sad that this series has finally concluded, but I think that's because for the past 5 years, it's been a monthly ritual for me to read the latest issue of the comic and then after work go down to my local comic store and pick up a hard copy of the latest issue. So it truly was a fond experience actually getting to engage in this monthly ritual, and with the comic officially coming to an end, I am going to miss going down to my local comic store and picking up the latest issue. But also at the same time, I don't know if you've seen my previous videos, but I have mentioned previously before that I have not been very happy with the comic for the past 2 years. In my personal opinion, I think that the comic did reach its peak with the Whisperer story arc, and then after that, it just really fell by the wayside for me, and I think that Kirkman has lost steam over these past 2 years. So for him to officially mark an end to this series, I think it was the right decision for him. Of course, the question is this a worthy send-off to such an epic comic series? And my answer to that is yes. As much as I had been completely disinterested in the comic for the past 2 years, I must say that this last issue was very impressive. And I think that it was absolutely a worthy send-off for the comic series that has been going for what, the past 15 years or so? 16 years? To get into the meat of this issue, it is true that it is 72 pages long, and I think it serves as an epilogue to the entire series. So we start off in a time jump, and in fact it is a relatively large time jump. I'm talking probably a quarter of a century. Carl is all grown up, and he's married to Sophia, and they have a daughter together, their daughter Andrea, which I thought that was really sweet that he named her after his late stepmother. Now, as much as I did enjoy this issue, I will admit that I definitely had some gripes, and one of them in particular is in regards to Carl and Sophia's relationship. See, this is one thing that I really don't like about time jumps, is that to me, a time jump is nothing but an excuse for lazy storytelling or creating a plot hole that is not necessarily answered. And yes, Kirkman has teased for a while the relationship between Carl and Sophia, but it would have been nice to actually see there be a confirmation of their relationship prior to them getting married and having a child, because in all honesty, to see them married now, it just kind of really lessens the impact of their relationship in general. So a walker had broken loose onto Carl's property and he had to dispatch it, and it turned out that this walker belonged to Herschel Jr. And Herschel Jr. in this current time frame is running a business where he's using walkers as a sideshow attraction. Carl is visibly upset about this because he believes that this business that Herschel is running could potentially put people in danger, including his own daughter, and the last thing that he would want to happen is for his daughter to be put in danger and possibly get bit by a walker. So he confronts Herschel Jr. Herschel Jr. asks him him what happened to his walker that got away, and Carl ended up dispatching him, and Herschel Jr., of course, is not very happy about this because in this time frame, walkers are a rare commodity and apparently worth a lot of money. Because of this, Herschel Jr. threatens to press charges against Carl, and Carl basically says, "Come at me, bruh. You know where I live." So the sheriff shows up at his house, and I can only assume that this is supposed to be Mercer. Kirkman didn't really specify if that really is Mercer. If anybody can confirm that that is the case, then certainly feel free to comment on it. But anywho, so the sheriff shows up at Carl's house and tells him that he has indeed broken the law and that he will be facing a hearing. And Carl goes into this diatribe about how this walker appeared on his property and could have potentially hurt his daughter, and that he does not approve of Herschel's business, and that he thinks that these walkers, they should not be treated as entertainment, that they should be treated as a threat. And of course, the sheriff tells him that, well, that's not really my problem. I'm just going by the rules. Informal hearing takes place. Both men present their sides of the argument, and Maggie, who turns out to be the president, shows up and convinces the judge to let Carl off the hook. However, at the same time, under the condition that he brings Herschel Jr. another walker. There is a conversation that takes place between Carl and Maggie. Carl tells her that she's let Herschel get away with too much, that she has been very overprotective of him and has not really shown him just how awful this world has treated them in the past. And, you know, I honestly didn't really care much for Maggie, but in this moment, I really hated her. And I can understand why a lot of my friends just absolutely despised Maggie, because holy hell. Okay, pardon my French, but she's quite the insufferable cunt in this moment. I understand in what she has went through with losing her husband, and she does not want her son to grow up in this incredibly hellish world, but at the same time, it's like, bitch, come on. You knew that the walkers were dangerous. You should have known that based off of what happened with one of his walkers getting astray and wandering off, you should have known that that could have potentially posed an incredible danger to people. Yet you chose to allow him to conduct his business without enforcing any sort of precautions to ensure that nobody gets hurt. My God, so stupid. So fucking stupid. And then we get to what I would probably consider one of my favorite moments from this issue, and that is Sophia giving a verbal beating to her mother and dropping some truth bombs. So she tells Maggie that if she does not keep Herschel Jr. in check, that he could very well turn out to be like Sebastian Milton, the same person who killed Rick Grimes. If I were to dish out the real MVP awards of this entire series, I think one of those honors would certainly, without a doubt, go to Sophia. Cut back to Herschel Jr. checking out of his hotel room, and as it turns out, Carl did destroy the remaining walkers that Herschel had in his inventory. As Carl is leaving on what I can only assume to be a supply run, he runs into Lydia. Now, here is another gripe that I have about this time jump, is that we never really got proper closure on Carl and Lydia's relationship. There's no mention from Carl as to why he broke up with Lydia, and it certainly would have been great if we actually got some proper closure to their relationship. Like, I don't understand why he couldn't have mentioned that he was young at the time and that Lydia was kind of a fling. It's never really been properly explained as to why they've broken up and now why Carl is with Sophia. And unfortunately, that is not something that we're really going to get. And honestly, I was not very impressed with this scene. I never really cared for Lydia that much to begin with, so I could care less about the relationship between her and Carl. I mean, it's water under the bridge at this point. I don't understand. I understand that we wanted to go back to Lydia to kind of finish up her story, but I don't think this was necessarily a proper closing of the storyline between Carl and Lydia, and I honestly think that this could have been done so much better. And I love how during this stop, Carl ends up stopping by Negan's house. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that Negan is around. It's either that or he's asleep, and I'm kind of bummed by that. I was really hoping that maybe we would get at least one more moment between Negan and Carl. And we cut to my other personal favorite moment in this issue, and I'm sure many of you are not surprised by this, and of course I'm talking about the wrapping up of Eugene's story. Now, if you are brand new to my channel and are not familiar with the Walking Dead related content that I've done for this channel, I am a huge fan of Eugene Porter. He is my personal favorite character in this series, and I must say that I'm really happy that Kirkman gave him a somewhat happy ending. It's more of a bittersweet ending, because unfortunately Stephanie passed away around this time in the storyline, and honestly I'm a little sad by that because Eugene had been through so much. He lost his best friend Abraham, and he got his heart broken by Rosita, and it was just a breath of fresh air to see him with someone who truly loved him for what he was, and it's just a real shame that Stephanie did not live up to the end. But despite all that, I am happy that Kirkman decided to keep him alive. And not only that, but apparently it seems that during this time jump, Eugene has been quite busy. It had been teased previously that he was going to start working on getting this locomotive business started, and that's exactly what he's been doing. It's amazing how far he's come with the building of these trains and getting these trains in motion. And it's amazing how he's really helped to rebuild civilization. And now his goal is, and it looks like that's going to be accomplished, is that he's going to be able to get these trains from one end of the country to the other and vice versa. And that is a massive achievement after civilization had basically lost everything when the zombie apocalypse happened. Then after the moment with Eugene, we cut to Laura, and Jesus Christ, I am so annoyed by this. This was another gripe that I have with the comic. I understand that Laura has lost Dwight, but it's unbelievable that about over 20 years later and she's still bitter. She still has this bitter anger towards Rick about what happened. Never mind the fact that Dwight was a complete idiot and he had what was coming to him, but whatever. Anywho, Carl gives Laura a verbal talking to, and good on him for standing up to his father because, like I said before, Laura is a complete bitch and she deserved to get verbally chastised for the way how she spoke about Carl's father. After saying his final goodbyes to Lydia, Carl returns home and Sophia is visually not happy with him and in fact quite upset because word gets around that Carl had in fact destroyed the remaining property of Herschel Jr.'s, and now she's obviously upset because of this. He's going to go to jail for it. And Carl tells Sophia that it was absolutely worth it if it meant that his daughter was going to remain safe. So after this verbal back and forth between Carl and Sophia, the sheriff shows up to arrest Carl, and because Carl has destroyed Herschel Jr.'s remaining property, well, that is a much more serious crime, so now this time he's going to be reporting to the High Court. And in the High Court, the judge makes the final ruling. So Carl could go to jail, he could pay a massive hefty fine, or actually, now that I think about this, I think what they meant by High Court is that this is, in a sense, going up to the Supreme Court. And from that ruling, it is decided to be law, whatever is set forth by the judge. And as it turns out, the judge presiding over the High Court happens to be Michonne. That's good on Michonne. She's actually gone from lawyer to high judge. So anyways, she reads over Carl's case and tells him to present himself as to why he think what he did was just. So he goes into this long speech about how far civilization has come in the past 20 years and that walkers should no longer be amongst the living. And this was actually a very beautifully crafted speech by Kirkman for Carl, and I think it lays out everything of what The Walking Dead stood for, with dealing with zombies and civilization rebuilding itself and how far they've come. So after listening to Carl's speech, Michonne makes the decision to outlaw the type of business that Herschel Jr. is doing. And obviously, because of this, Herschel Jr. confronts Carl and chastises him for not understanding where he's coming from, because according to him, Carl believes that he has no clue what life was like prior to the rebuilding of civilization, which Herschel Jr. makes it a point across that, yes, he very much knows what life was like. He remembers hearing about how his father died so brutally. And one thing that really bugged me about this part, as much as I enjoyed it, I think that Kirkman didn't exactly do a good job with wrapping this up, because the way how this ended between Carl, Herschel Jr., and Maggie, it's like as if he left that one thread of conflict open and it hasn't been wrapped up. The way how I would have concluded this is I would have had Carl meet with Maggie and Michonne and Herschel Jr. to reach some sort of compromise. He could have easily convinced Michonne, and I'm sure Maggie would have no doubt agreed to it, that Herschel Jr. could have kept his business under the conditions that he ensured that proper safety precautions were put in place to ensure that no dangerous incident happens. Actually, come to think about it, there's one thing that I find kind of odd that Kirkman never really addressed, and that is, during this timeline, what happens to people when they die? Do they just actually die and not come back, or do they still turn into walkers? Because going back to my point before, and that were the case, if they still have the issue of people turning after they've died, then I can't see why those deceased that have turned can't be turned over to Herschel Jr. for his business practice, as opposed to just going out and looking for a stray roamer walking about. Herschel did state that the reason why he had this business was to show people that just how dangerous walkers were and just how dangerous of a time that they lived in. So I could not see why Michonne would allow Herschel Jr. to have this business practice for educational purposes. Obviously, he would have to change up how he runs his business. And after that whole story comes to an end, we get a beautiful, poignant moment of Carl reading a bedtime story to Andrea about his father. And my goodness, if you did not tear up during this moment, you really have no soul. It truly was a very special way to wrap up this long ongoing story that's been going on for 15 years, and Kirkman just put a pretty little bow around it. And yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. Despite my grievances with the way how some characters have been wrapped up, overall, I truly enjoyed this issue, and I thought that it was very much a fitting closure to a 16-year-old series. I mean, think about that, folks. It's been 16 years that this comic has been going on, and kudos to you, Kirkman, for coming up with a truly great send-off. Now, it wasn't a perfect conclusion, but it was certainly satisfactory enough. Now, just because the series has officially come to an end, I don't think it is necessarily the end for the Walking Dead universe. I have a feeling that probably somewhere like few years down the line, I'm sure Kirkman might come up with some additional material, whether it's in the form of a one-shot like the Here's Negan story arc, or if he decides to create a completely different story set in the Walking Dead universe with different characters. I think there is the huge possibility of all that stuff happen, so I wouldn't be crying just yet over a dead franchise, because like I said, I think give it a few years, I'm sure Kirkman might decide to go back to the Walking Dead universe. You never know, right? And I just want to say this to the legendary Robert Kirkman. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for creating such an incredible image, such an incredible story, story that I have truly cherished for the past 5 years. And while a part of me is sad to see it come to an end, I fully understand why. Because as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. And you, sir, I wish you nothing but the best on your future endeavors. And that concludes my recap and review of issue 193, aka the final installment of The Walking Dead. I am curious to know what your thoughts are if you've read it. I would love to hear what you have to say, so certainly feel free to leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching. Until next time, dear friends, this is Cynical Lindsay, signing off.